Hi there. Sit back and relax while I explain the iceberg of unsolved historical mysteries. Tier 1, Surface, Lost City of Atlantis. Atlantis comes from exactly one ancient source, Plato, writing around 360 BC. He described it as a powerful island civilization that angered the gods and was swallowed by the sea in a single day and night. That's it. One philosopher, two dialogues, and roughly 2,400 years of people losing their minds over it. The candidates are everywhere. Santorini, whose volcanic eruption around 1600 BC did devastate Minoan Crete, the Azores, the Atlantic seabed, Antarctica. Serious archaeologists have surveyed several of these. Nothing conclusive has turned up. The frustrating possibility, one that most enthusiasts don't love, is that Plato simply made it up as a philosophical thought experiment about hubris and the decline of great powers. He was known to do that. The story does its job either way. A civilization so proud it got wiped out. Whether that's history or a very effective parable, nobody can say for certain. Jack the Ripper. In the autumn of 1888, at least 5 women were murdered in Whitechapel, a poor district in London's East End. The killer was never caught. What made this case different from other unsolved murders was the method. Surgical precision in the mutilations, consistent enough that police believed it was one person. And the letters, some almost certainly fake, sent to newspapers and investigators taunting them by name. The press called him Jack the Ripper and ran with it. Over 100 suspects have been seriously proposed since then. Doctors, butchers, Polish immigrants, a royal physician, even Prince Albert Victor. In 2014, a businessman claimed DNA on a shawl found near one of the victims pointed to a Polish barber named Aaron Kosminski, a longtime suspect. Other researchers immediately disputed the methodology. The case is 136 years old, the crime scenes are long gone, and the evidence chain for anything is essentially broken. He was probably never going to be caught. Voynich Manuscript. The Voynich manuscript is a 240-page illustrated book, carbon dated to the early 15th century, written entirely in a script no one has ever identified and a language no one has ever decoded. The illustrations are strange, botanical drawings of plants that don't match any known species, naked figures in green pools connected by pipe-like structures, astronomical diagrams, pages that look like pharmaceutical recipes. It reads like a real document. The text has consistent statistical patterns, letter frequencies, and what looks like grammar. That rules out pure gibberish. But every serious attempt to crack it, and there have been many, including by professional cryptographers and more recently machine learning, has either failed outright or produced a claimed solution that other researchers immediately rejected. Some think it's an elaborate hoax. Some think it's a constructed language. Some think it's a cipher we simply don't have the key for. It was purchased by rare book dealer Wilfred Voynich in 1912 and now sits at Yale's Bioneka Library. Anyone can view it online. Nobody can read it. Mary Celeste. The Mary Celeste was found drifting in the Atlantic on December 4th, 1872, about 600 miles east of the Azores. The cargo, 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol, was intact. The crew's belongings were still on board. Food was in the galley. The ship was in reasonable condition, sails partly set, no obvious signs of violence or struggle. The lifeboat was gone, and so were the 10 people who had been on board, including the captain, his wife, and their 2-year-old daughter. Nobody ever turned up. The most plausible theory involves the alcohol cargo. Some barrels had leaked, possibly releasing vapor, causing the captain to order a precautionary evacuation onto the lifeboat while the ship aired out. Then, tethered behind the ship, the lifeboat's line snapped in rough seas, and they were lost. It fits the evidence. But it's still a guess. Arthur Conan Doyle wrote a fictional version of the story in 1884 and accidentally convinced a lot of people that the crew had been found at the dinner table mid-meal, which they hadn't. Lost colony of Roanoke. In 1587, around 115 English colonists landed on Roanoke Island off the coast of what is now North Carolina. Their governor, John White, sailed back to England for supplies almost immediately. He didn't make it back until 1590, delayed by the Spanish Armada conflict. and when he did, the settlement was empty. No bodies, no signs of a fight, no obvious explanation. The only clue was the word Croatoan carved into a post, and CRO carved into a tree. Croatoan was the name of a nearby island and a local Native American group. White took this as a sign they'd relocated there voluntarily, but he couldn't investigate. Bad weather forced the ships to leave. Nobody followed up properly for years. The most widely accepted theory today is that the colonists broke into smaller groups, and some were absorbed into local Lumbee or Croatoan communities. Archaeological work in the area has turned up a few suggestive finds, but nothing definitive. They just dissolved into the landscape, and the record ends there. Disappearance of Amelia Earhart. Amelia Earhart vanished on July 2, 1937, somewhere over the Central Pacific. She and her navigator Fred Noonan were attempting to locate Howland Island, a tiny flat strip of land barely visible from the air, during her round-the-world flight attempt. Radio contact became erratic, then stopped. A U.S. Navy search found nothing. 3 main theories have circulated ever since. The first is that they simply missed the island, ran out of fuel, and ditched in the ocean, the most straightforward reading of the evidence. The second centers on Nikumaroro, an uninhabited island about 400 kilometers southeast of Howland, where bone fragments, a woman's shoe, and other artifacts were found in the 1940s. The bones were later lost, which is its own problem. The third, more dramatic theory suggests they were captured by the Japanese, either by accident or as spies. No serious evidence supports that one. TIGAR, a research group, has been investigating the Nikumaroro hypothesis for decades. The ocean is large and deep, and not particularly interested in giving answers. Tier 2, shallow waters. Indus Valley Civilization collapse. Around 1900 BCE, the Harappan civilization, which had built Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, cities with drainage systems more sophisticated than most of contemporary Europe, started falling apart. Not overnight. Over a couple of centuries, the great urban centers were gradually abandoned. Populations shifted east and south, and the script stopped being used. The leading explanation for a long time was an Aryan invasion, which has largely been abandoned. The current frontrunner is climate. A prolonged weakening of the monsoon seems to have reduced the river flows that the whole agricultural system depended on. The Gagar-Hakra river system, which ran through the heart of Harappan territory, may have dried up significantly during this period. Trade networks with Mesopotamia also collapsed around the same time. Whether it was the climate alone, or climate plus internal stress, or something else entirely, the honest answer is that we're working mostly from archaeology on a civilization whose writing we can't read. That's a significant handicap. Genghis Khan's tomb. Genghis Khan died in 1227, and almost immediately the location of his grave became a secret. According to tradition, the funeral procession killed anyone they encountered on the route to prevent the site from being known. Once buried, the ground was reportedly ridden over repeatedly by horses until it was indistinguishable from the surrounding steppe. Some accounts say trees were planted over it. The region around Burkhan Khaldun in the Khenti Mountains of northeastern Mongolia is the most commonly cited candidate. It was a sacred place to Genghis during his lifetime. The area is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and access is heavily restricted, partly by Mongolian law and partly by the wishes of local communities who consider searching for the tomb disrespectful. A few remote sensing surveys have been done without physically disturbing the ground. Nothing definitive has turned up. It may be that the concealment worked exactly as intended and the tomb will simply never be found. Franklin Expedition. John Franklin sailed from England in May 1845 with 2 ships, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, and 128 men headed for the Northwest Passage. They were last seen by European whalers in Baffin Bay in July of that year. After that, nothing, until 1850, when a search expedition found evidence of the first winter camp on Beechy Island, including 3 graves. A note found in 1859 filled in some of the picture. The ships had been icebound since 1846. Franklin had died in June 1847, and the survivors had abandoned the ships in April 1848, intending to walk south. None of them made it. Inuit oral testimony, collected over subsequent decades, described encounters with desperate men dragging boats across the ice, and later, bodies. Skeletal remains showed signs of scurvy, starvation, hypothermia, and cut marks consistent with cannibalism. Both wrecks have since been found, Erebus in 2014, Terror in 2016, and are still being excavated. What exactly happened in those final months, who made which decisions and when, remains pieced together from fragments. Fate of the Roman Ninth Legion. The Ninth Legion, Legio IX Hispana, had a long and documented history. It fought in the invasion of Britain in 43 CE, suppressed Boudicca's revolt in 60 CE, and appears in records through the early 2nd century. Then it simply stops appearing. No record of its disbandment, no record of a defeat, just silence. The most dramatic theory, popularized by the 1954 novel The Eagle of the Ninth and several films, is that it marched into Scotland around 117 CE and was wiped out by the Caledonians. The historical evidence for it is thin. More recent scholarship points to inscriptions suggesting the legion was still active in the 120s CE, possibly transferred east and destroyed during the Bar Kokhba revolt in Judea in the 130s. Others argue it was simply reorganized out of existence. Units were disbanded, renamed, and merged regularly in the Roman army. The disappearance may be less dramatic than it looks, but the records are incomplete enough that nobody can say definitively what happened to roughly 5,000 soldiers. Oak Island Money Pit. Oak Island is a small island off the coast of Nova Scotia, and since 1795 people have been digging holes in it looking for treasure. The original discovery was a circular depression in the ground with a flagstone underneath and, allegedly, log platforms every few meters as you went deeper. At some point, flood tunnels were discovered, apparently engineered to fill the shaft with seawater whenever you got close to the bottom. This has been interpreted as evidence of something very valuable buried very deliberately. Templar treasure, pirate gold, Francis Bacon's secret papers, the actual Holy Grail. Dozens of expeditions have dug, pumped, and drilled over 2 centuries. Several people have died in the attempts. Pieces of chain, fragments of parchment, and carved stones have been reported over the years, though provenance on most of them is questionable. The current excavation, running since the 2000s, has found some genuinely interesting artifacts. What nobody has found is a treasure. The more sobering possibility is that the pit is a natural geological formation, a sinkhole, and the flood tunnels are just the water table. SS Orang Medan. The Orang Medan story goes like this. Sometime in the late 1940s, ships in the Strait of Malacca picked up a distress call from a Dutch freighter. The message described the crew dying one by one, ended with, "I die," and then went silent. When rescuers boarded, they found the entire crew dead, faces frozen in expressions of terror, arms outstretched. Before the ship could be towed to port, a fire broke out in the cargo hold, and the vessel exploded and sank. It's a compelling story. The problem is that almost none of it can be verified. No ship named Orang Medan appears in Dutch maritime registries. The earliest written account appeared in a Dutch newspaper in 1948, but its sourcing is murky. Some researchers think the story was invented wholesale. Others suggest there may have been a real incident involving an unregistered ship carrying illegal cargo, possibly chemical weapons or smuggled potassium cyanide, and that the story was embellished to explain what had actually been a cover-up. Tier 3, Deep Water. Copper Scroll Treasure. Most of the Dead Sea Scrolls are religious texts, scripture, commentaries, community rules. The Copper Scroll is something else entirely. Found in 1952 in Cave 3 at Qumran, it's made of actual copper rather than parchment, and instead of theology, it contains a list. 64 locations across Judea, each one describing a hidden cache of gold, silver, or temple vessels. Some entries are specific enough to include measurements and landmarks. The total, if you add it up, comes to an almost implausible quantity, tens of tons of precious metal. Nobody has found any of it. Part of the problem is that the landmarks described under the black stone, in the cistern at the entrance of the courtyard, are too vague to pin down 2,000 years later. Scholars are split on what to make of it. Some think it's a genuine inventory, possibly of temple treasure hidden before the Roman destruction of Jerusalem in 70 CE. Others think it's a symbolic or ritual document, maybe describing treasure that was meant to exist in a religious sense rather than a physical one. It sits in a museum in Amman and hasn't given up much. Baigong pipes. Near Mount Baigong in Qinghai Province, China, there are rust-colored metal tubes embedded in rock formations around a series of caves. Some run into the nearby lake. They were reported more widely in the early 2000s and immediately attracted the usual crowd of ancient astronaut enthusiasts, claiming they were too old and too regular to be natural or human-made. Chinese geologists who actually examined them concluded they were most likely fossilized tree roots, organic material that was gradually replaced by iron-rich minerals over a very long period, a process called replacement fossilization that produces exactly this kind of tube-like structure in rock. It doesn't stop the story from circulating, partly because the fossilization explanation requires a bit of geological background to follow, and alien pipes is a faster sentence. A few of the tubes do seem to match no obvious natural structure, which is enough for the mystery to stay alive in certain corners of the internet. Phaistos disc. The Phaistos disc was found in 1908 in a Bronze Age palace on Crete, dated to around 1700 BC. It's a fired clay disc, about 16 centimeters across, with symbols pressed into both sides in a spiral pattern using what appear to be pre-made stamps, making it technically one of the earliest examples of something like movable type. There are 241 impressions of 45 distinct signs: a helmeted head, a walking figure, a fish, a plant, a ship. Nobody knows what any of it says. The problem isn't just that the script is undeciphered, it's that there's almost nothing else like it. No other inscriptions, no parallel texts, no bilingual document to work from. Without that, decipherment is essentially guesswork, and guesswork is what the field has produced. Proposed readings in Minoan, in early Greek, in Semitic languages, in things that aren't languages at all. Some researchers have suggested it's a forgery, though most reject that. It probably isn't a forgery. It almost certainly means something. What that something is remains completely open. Desert kites. Desert kites are one of those archaeological features that make you stop and reconsider your assumptions about early human organization. They're large stone wall structures, sometimes stretching for kilometers, built across arid landscapes in the Middle East, Central Asia, and North Africa. The name comes from their shape as seen from the air, which resembles a kite with a long tail. The function seems clear enough. They're funnel-shaped traps designed to drive herds of gazelle or other animals into an enclosure where they could be killed in large numbers. What's less clear is who built them, when, and over what period. Some date to the Neolithic, some appear much more recent, and in many areas they cut across landscapes that pass through multiple cultures over thousands of years. Assigning them to a single group is often impossible. The scale of the engineering required, coordinating labor to build walls across tens of kilometers of open desert, implies a level of social organization that isn't always reflected in other archaeological evidence from the same periods and places. They're common enough across the region that they're not exactly a secret, but they don't fit neatly into any single civilization story. 9 unknown men. The story goes that after the Kalinga War in 262 BC, a campaign so brutal it reportedly caused Emperor Ashoka to convert to Buddhism, he founded a secret society of 9 scholars, each one the guardian of a book covering a different field of knowledge: propaganda, physiology, microbiology, alchemy, communication, gravity, cosmology, light, and sociology. These 9 men passed their books down through generations, quietly steering human civilization from the shadows. It's a good story. The first problem is that it appears in no ancient Indian source whatsoever. The earliest known written version comes from a 1923 book by French author Louis Jacoliot, which is not exactly primary documentation for a 3rd century BC institution. It was later popularized by Talbot Mundy's 1923 novel and has been recycled through conspiracy literature ever since. Ashoka was real, the Kalinga War was real, and the remorse and conversion are documented. The 9 men might be not. Tier 4, Dark Waters. Tarim mummies. The Tara mummies sit in an uncomfortable place in the archaeological record. The term covers a cluster of mummified or unusually preserved bodies from burial contexts in Manchuria, some showing atypical wrapping or grave goods that don't fit neatly into known local cultures. Many of these finds came out of early 20th century excavations, when documentation standards were inconsistent and political circumstances in the region made follow-up work difficult. Some specimens ended up in collections abroad with minimal context attached. Without secure excavation records and comparative material, questions about cultural affiliation and date stay open. It's less about something strange happening, and more about insufficient record-keeping making a potentially ordinary find impossible to interpret. Utsuro Bune. In 1803, fishermen on the Hitachi coast of Japan reportedly encountered a round vessel sitting offshore, hollow, roughly 3 meters across, with a young woman inside wearing unfamiliar clothing and speaking an unknown language. She held a box she refused to let anyone touch. The interior walls had writing nobody recognized. The fishermen eventually pushed the vessel back out to sea. The story appears in at least 3 separate illustrated Japanese texts from the period, all describing roughly the same craft, which suggests something happened even if the details got distorted. The woman may have been a foreign castaway, Dutch or Russian, whose appearance was filtered through retelling. No physical trace, no independent record. The box stayed closed, the boat drifted off, and that's where the story ends. Kensington Runestone. In 1898, a Swedish-American farmer in Kensington, Minnesota, claimed to have dug up a flat stone slab with runic inscriptions describing a Norse expedition into the American interior in 1362. If genuine, it would push confirmed European presence in the continent back well before Columbus. Most runologists think it's a 19th century hoax. The rune forms and spelling look more modern Swedish than medieval Norse. A smaller group of researchers argues those anomalies could reflect a regional dialect rather than forgery. The debate has been running for over 100 years. The farmer denied carving it until his death. Nobody has proven he did, and nobody has proven he didn't. It sits in a museum in Alexandria, Minnesota, and the argument continues at low volume. Great Serpent Mound. The Great Serpent Mound in Ohio is a massive earthwork shaped like a coiled snake, about 420 meters long, following the ridge of a natural plateau. Who built it, and when has been harder to pin down than you'd expect. Early analysis linked it to the Adena culture, active from around 800 BCE onward. Later radiocarbon dating suggested a more recent construction around 1000 CE, placing it with the Fort Ancient culture instead. More recent work produced dates spanning both periods, raising the possibility of multiple construction phases. The head of the serpent points toward the summer solstice sunset, which may or may not be intentional. What it was actually for, ceremonial, territorial, astronomical, nobody knows with confidence. It's one of the most recognized Native American monuments in North America, and one of the least understood. Hallstatt burials. Hallstatt is a small town in the Austrian Alps that gave its name to an entire phase of European prehistory. The community had been mining salt from the mountain above the town since the Bronze Age, and salt was serious money. The elite burials reflect that high-status individuals interred with bronze and iron weapons, decorated vessels, and imported goods including Greek pottery, Baltic amber, and possibly silk. The range of those trade connections is striking for what looks like a mountain mining settlement. What's less clear is the social structure behind it. Who controlled the mines? How wealth was distributed? How the elite maintained their position? The graves show the outcome, but not the mechanism. Thousands of burials have been excavated since the 19th century. The trade network is visible. The politics behind it largely aren't. Tier 5, the Abyss, Green Children of Woolpit. Sometime in the 12th century, 2 children appeared near the village of Woolpit in Suffolk, a boy and a girl, both with distinctly green-tinted skin, speaking a language nobody recognized, and refusing to eat anything except raw broad beans. The boy died not long after. The girl survived, lost the green color over time, learned English, and apparently lived a fairly normal life. She said they had come from a place called St. Martin's Land, where everything was twilight and the sun never fully rose. 2 medieval chroniclers recorded the story independently, which at minimum means it was circulating widely enough to be worth writing down. The explanations that get taken most seriously today involve malnutrition, specifically chlorosis, an iron deficiency condition that can give skin a greenish tint, combined with the possibility that the children were Flemish refugees, displaced during a period of persecution, who had wandered far enough to end up somewhere completely unfamiliar. That would account for the foreign language and the disorientation. The green skin would have faded once they started eating properly. It fits. It's also still a guess. Dancing Plague of 1518. In July 1518, a woman named Frau Trophäa stepped into a street in Strasbourg and started dancing. She didn't stop for days. Within a week, dozens of others had joined her. By the end of the month, there were reportedly around 400 people dancing through the streets, some collapsing from exhaustion, some dying. The city authorities, apparently deciding the best treatment was to let it run its course, hired musicians to keep the dancers going. It lasted about 2 months. The most widely cited explanation is mass psychogenic illness, extreme collective stress, in a region that had recently suffered famine, disease, and religious anxiety, expressing itself physically. Ergot contamination has also been proposed, since the fungus that grows on rye can cause convulsions and hallucinations. What's not really in dispute is that it happened. It's well documented in civic and medical records from the time. Why it happened is the part nobody has settled. Bermeja Island. Bermeja appeared on Spanish and later European maps of the Gulf of Mexico from the early 16th century onward. A small island sitting northwest of the Yucatan Peninsula, marked consistently enough across different maps that cartographers were clearly copying something. Then modern satellite imaging and seafloor surveys found nothing there. No island, no shoal, no underwater feature that might explain the original sighting. The disappearance attracted renewed attention in the 2000s when Mexico and the United States were negotiating maritime boundaries in the Gulf, and Bermeja's former location happened to fall inside a zone rich in oil deposits. A Mexican congressional inquiry was actually launched to investigate whether the island had been deliberately erased from records for political reasons. The more mundane explanation is cumulative cartographic error, one early misidentification copied faithfully for centuries. Islands have appeared and disappeared from maps before for exactly that reason. But the timing of its rediscovery, in the middle of an oil boundary dispute, gave the story a life it wouldn't otherwise have had. Zeno map. In 1558, a Venetian nobleman named Niccolo Zeno published a map, an accompanying narrative claiming they were based on letters and charts left by his ancestors, two brothers who had supposedly explored the North Atlantic in the 1390s. The map showed islands in positions that don't match anything real, most famously Friesland, a substantial island south of Iceland that doesn't exist. It also showed Greenland with a level of interior detail inconsistent with what Europeans actually knew at the time. The map influenced North Atlantic cartography for decades, with Friesland appearing on other maps well into the 17th century. The debate is whether Niccolo fabricated the whole thing, partly invented it from fragments of real family documents, or was himself working from genuine but badly garbled older sources. Martin Frobisher actually thought he'd reached Friesland during his 1576 voyage. He hadn't. The map caused real navigational confusion for the better part of a century, which is a notable achievement for something that may have been entirely made up. Taos hum. Since the early 1990s, a small percentage of people living in and around Taos, New Mexico, have reported hearing a low, persistent hum, somewhere in the range of 30 to 80 hertz, roughly like a diesel engine idling in the distance. It's louder indoors than outside, which is unusual for environmental noise. It's worse at night. Some people find it maddening enough to have moved away. A formal investigation in the mid-1990s, involving researchers from several universities, detected nothing on standard equipment while a portion of the local residents clearly heard something. Two main categories of explanation exist. One is external: distant industrial activity, military installations, underground gas lines, seismic activity. The other is internal. A subset of people may be perceiving low-frequency signals that most ears filter out, or generating the perception neurologically without any external source. Neither has been confirmed.